I'm reminded of the story of the woman who got married and cooked a piece of cooked a roast for her spouse the first time ever, and it was a big roast, but she cut off the ends of the roast before she put it in the oven, and did that again and again. Eventually, her spouse said, "Why'd you cut the ends of the roast off?" And she said, "I don't know why. My mom did that." And she asks her mom, says, "I don't know why I did that. Your grandmother did that." Grandmother's still alive. And so they go to grandmother, and grandmother says, "Well, because I only had a wood stove that was this big. And so I would cut off the ends to make it fit. And that's why." So, it reminds me of that story because it is, things that are adaptive or maladaptive that are responses from that first generation responses to the trauma. You're saying that gets behaviorally and genetically, and I don't know if you want to talk about some of the research indicating that it can be passed genetically.
Put it in
Yeah.
like the simplest way. The reality of it is that trauma does affect your body. And hence why there is that book that exists by Bessel van der Kolk that says the body keeps the score. Because your nervous system does indeed develop a response to the trauma that has occurred, right? But then your nervous system sort of keeps it as a map inside of your body. But guess what? Your body doesn't exist by itself. Your body exists along with its brain, right? With the brain. And so the brain also keeps a map of what responses it has developed to the stressors that has happened in life, right? And so very similarly to how we could through behavioral responses change our neural networks, right? We've spoken so much about that in the research. If we're not having any type of behavioral changes, guess what? Then your brain is essentially just solidifying whatever trauma responses it's already developed, right? And that gets encoded into your body as well. And so if we have these specific responses that have now encoded into us, into our body, it's now part of our genetics and then unfortunately gets passed on, or fortunately, right? If there are modifications, gets passed on to the next generation. So even though I want to say, even though, yes, it is true that the trauma can get passed on to the next generation, I also want to highlight though that through behavioral modification, we can, and cognitive behavioral therapy and somatic therapy, we can make modifications such that we're breaking that cycle and we're not having to pass it on genetically or behaviorally onto the next generation. So while yes, it's so valuable that that research has, brought to light, oh my goodness, this gets passed on two ways. It's also equally important for us to understand, wait a minute, but there's actually a solution.